And welcome back to a new episode of the Women's Strength Society show today with 5 carb mistakes that are keeping you soft. And we see this almost in every woman that comes to us for support on like how to finally achieve visible muscle definition. So today we're diving into those 5 mistakes.
Yeah, at least a lot, like majority of them. And before we go into that, the last episode we talked about what to do, so go check that out as well. And in this episode, we are going to talk about what not to do. And the very first one is, when we talk about carbohydrates. So, full disclaimer: if this is the first time that you are tuning into your show, we are pro carb. We think that it's carbohydrates are a big part of getting in shape, performing, and being healthy for women. And so we are pro carb, but it doesn't mean that it's a free pass for everything and anything. And the first mistake that we see when it comes to increasing carbohydrate is then suddenly women going way overboard with flour-based products and using that as their main carb source pretty much all the time.
And I understand it, because when you are someone who fears carbs or who has gone on a lowerish carb diet for a long time, one of the things that oftentimes is not part of your day-to-day nutrition is probably something like bread, the good old sourdough bread, the bagels, like all this like juicy, yummy stuff. And then when you start incorporating carbs again, you're like, oh, now I can eat those again. And I'm not saying that you can't, right? You can. But there is definitely time and place for it. But we also don't want to go overboard. So when you start to eat more carbs again, then just having all your carb sources coming from flour-based products will definitely have an impact on your digestion, but also the look. So it does have an impact on the, and maybe that's like minor, but we do see changes also like in the like how the skin is looking and like how tight someone is if someone is eating like potatoes and rice versus like all day every day flour-based products.
Yeah, and this is something people will be like, yeah, how do you know? Why? What is the evidence and that sort of things? And it's really based on experience. And this is something that we've seen time and time again with women who get super lean. And for those women, like pretty much every detail is going to matter. But also when you make some changes, then it's going to be reflected in their look. And this is what you're saying, the texture of the skin, but also even just the tightness and overall look. And this is something that is hard to see when you're not like super duper lean. But we even had that recently with one of our clients, and she was prepping for her wedding, and she was like, she's still actually super, super lean. And at what point she reached out, sorry, she reached out and was like, hey, I don't know, we reversed into the wedding. So she was already finished with the fat loss phase. And at one point she was like, hey, my weight is going up a bit like too quickly. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. And then we troubleshoot that, and it was like, okay, it was a bit too much flour-based product. Let's go back to eating mainly like whole unprocessed food, or mainly unprocessed food like potatoes and tuber vegetables and that sort of things. And then it's exact same macros, and she was hitting them like very accurately. She was a bodybuilder, so she knows exactly how to hit the macros. This is for her like not a problem at all. accuracy was there, and then she made that switch, and then immediately she lost like 2.5 pounds just because the change in food choices. And there are many possible things that can play a role into that. One of them is going to be about, you know, the water that is pulled from the flour and in the gut. The other one is going to be purely about food volume and the effect it has on motility. But the other one is also about the micronutrient content. And this is something like in flour, you just have less micronutrients than if you are eating potatoes and whole grain. It's just the way it is. And this is something that will have an impact on your metabolism and how your body is able to use those calories.
This is definitely something that I say quite often to clients, is when I'm looking at their nutrition logs and I see that someone is eating mainly processed stuff or more like flour-based stuff, and something is off in their like digestion or how they feel or their energy or whatever it is, although the macros seem right and the calorie intake seems right and they're hitting it, that looking at the like food quality can play a like, or can make a big difference on like how the body is responding to it. As Yannick just said, micronutrients are super important, and your body does sense that, right? So if you're not giving your body enough micronutrients, there is a stressor. That's a stressor for your body, that something is like missing, and so it will show that in some form or shape. And that's why having a look at like a little like deeper level when it comes to not only looking at calories and macros and increasing your carbs, which, I mean, we are, as you said, pro carbs. We love to give our ladies the carbs, but don't make the mistake to just like add more bagels and sourdough and croissants and whatnot.
Yeah, and this is the second mistake, right? It's not only flour, but it's also like anything that has carbs in it or that is sweet is not necessarily a carb. This is the second mistake. This is something that we also see like very, very often. And most likely because, you know, you have those forbidden foods and then it's like, no, this is off limit.
Yeah.
And then you realize like, oh, I'm actually allowed to eat carbohydrate. And then you think like cookies and donuts and I don't know, ice cream are carbohydrates, and yes, they do contain carbohydrate, but it's not like the best source of carbohydrate for the same reason that we just touched on. But this is something that we really have to repeat and reinforce. Not that we want to promote like orthorexia and that people have to be scared of eating those foods, but it's just the fact that 99% of those foods are not going to be as nutrient dense as, you know, if you are eating like whole wheat or millet or buckwheat or legumes and that sort of things. You're not going to get the same amount of fibers, the same micronutrient profile, but more importantly, like those quote unquote yummy foods, they are not only carbs, they are also like pretty high in fat. And in fact, I was looking at that the other day in the supermarket, and it's very interesting because they are all sitting between like 23 to 30 grams of fat per 100 grams. So
Yeah,
they are
that's a
actually, yeah, it's actually pretty high fat.
Yeah.
And so yes, you have still like 60 to 70%, 70 grams for 100 grams of carbohydrate. So it's fairly high in carbohydrate, but it's also fairly high in fat. And you know, it's the combination of that. Most of the time you're also going to have some salt in it, and it gives you like the perfect ratio between carbohydrate and fat, and this makes it very, very yummy. And I haven't looked into it, but I'm pretty certain that if you look at the salty counterparts like pizzas or, you know, pasta, I guess, because I never eat pasta, but, you know, savory stuff that has carbohydrate, but at the same time that has some sauce or some cheese, then I'm pretty sure that you are going to find some very similar ratio of having like roughly 25 to 30 grams of fat for 100 grams of the food that you are eating. all that to say, this is not only a carbohydrate, this is a combination of high fat, high carbohydrate food. And this is not what we talk about primarily when we say like eat your carbs, right? Even though we're not like, hey, this food is very bad for you. This is not what we're saying. But also like don't bullshit yourself into thinking that this is this should be your primary source of carbohydrates. So,
and I see this for one, it happens because it was forbidden for a long time, and then you kind of like open up the door again, and once you open up the door again, you're like, oh, this tastes so yummy, and then it's very, very easy to fall into the trap of just eating more of it. Like when I was, for example, eating prepping for my bikini photo shoot, right? I was eating 95% of my food came from unprocessed whole foods. It was very easy to stick to that. The moment you start eating more processed stuff again, it gets very easy to eat too much of it. And so again, we're not saying there is not a place for processed stuff. Especially when you're sitting on very high calories, we need to make sure that you're not just like crazy full and your stomach is getting stretched like my baby belly right now. So that you can get the food actually in and digest it as well. But we also don't want to overdo it. And most women that we see are not sitting on like super high calories. And the majority of their foods comes from processed stuff. And so this is where we need to have a look at the ratio from the carbs that you're eating, how much is actually coming from unprocessed whole foods.
100%. So this is about the type of food that you are eating. But now next to the actual food, there are also things that need to be done if you want to be able to tolerate more carbohydrate. And this is something that we also see like so often. And then women don't really understand like why is it that carbohydrate is, make them feel puffy or heavier and that sort of things. And it's not that carbohydrate are inherently fattening, but there are some things that you can do for your body to be able to tolerate more carbohydrate. And here the number one thing that you can do is actually be pretty active physically.
So what do you don't want to do?
So what you don't want to do is be a couch potato, right? And again, like it's not about promoting being always exercising and never resting. It's not about that. But you cannot expect to tolerate a lot of carbohydrate if your step count is around like 5,000 per day. It's just like you are not moving. 5,000 steps per day is really, you are sitting the whole day. Probably you have a desk job and you go from your chair to the bathroom or maybe to the kitchen, and then you go back and you sit, and then you sit in your car to go to your job and go back home, and then in the evening you are sitting maybe more at your desk because you are working or you are watching a show or whatever it may be. But you get very easily 3,000 steps just by living your life. And so if you are in that range of 3,000 to 5,000, then you are most likely not making it a point to move around.
And I mean, getting a training session in like 3, 4, even 5 times a week will not cut it. It's just not enough. If you're getting your training sessions in, even if you're training really like 6 days a week for an hour in the gym, it's not the same as moving your body on a daily basis and making it an effort to move around. And again, you don't have to do like 20,000 steps. That would be like on the other side of the spectrum of maybe overdoing it, depending on like how you can recover and what else you're doing in your life. But if you are, and I don't want to say like earn, because you should not have that mentality of like, oh, I need to earn my carbs. But you also need to understand that if you're not moving that much, then you simply don't need that many carbohydrates, right? Carbs are here to like fuel your activity and give you energy. And there is a level of like carbs that you need for like brain function, and so that all like your systems can work in your body well, 100%. But you will probably not eat like 300 plus grams of carbs a day when you're just moving 2, 3, 5,000 steps a day. It will not, probably not happen.
Yeah, maybe some women are outliers and they might need that. So it's not set in stone, but the likelihood of the average woman to get there is fairly low.
You should not expect it.
Yeah.
Let's say it like this. You cannot expect it from your body. Again, if you're a genetic outlier, then something different, but yeah.
100%. And so on that note, the higher the intensity of your, like we just talked about steps, but also in your training, nowadays it's pretty trendy to say like don't do any form of cardio or avoid high intensity cardio, high intensity interval training because of cortisol spikes and that sort of things. But the higher the intensity is, the more carbohydrate you are going to need during the session, but also to recover from that. Same thing with rep ranges. The higher the rep range is, the more metabolically demanding the session is going to be, and it means that you are going to need more carbohydrate if you perform in the higher rep ranges. And so what we do see as well is women who either entirely avoid that, which is a pity because it gives a lot of like very interesting benefits, or ladies who do that but then avoid carbohydrate.
Yeah,
right?
That's like the bad combination.
Yeah, and both case it's what you don't want to do. So if you do the high intensity interval training and you do some higher rep ranges, then you probably need a shit ton of carbs. And if you want to eat a lot of carbohydrate but you are avoiding high reps because of fatigue and high intensity interval training because of cortisol, then you are really preventing yourself or cutting out like the best strategies that you have, not only to need more carbohydrate but also to improve your tolerance for carbohydrate over time. So very, very powerful stuff. Again, like go back to the episode that we released before to understand a bit better what to do there.
And I mean, it's super easy to get confused, right? Like I totally get it. If you are not an expert in setting up all of those things, it's very hard to see the, how do you say that? See the woods for the tree. In German, you say
forest,
that. The forest for the tree. Because there are like so many pieces of the puzzles that you need to put together. Like this is our daily bread. Like we're doing nothing else day in, day out besides training and eating and walking so that we can tolerate more carbs. But this is what we are doing day in, day out, is like looking at the individual person and then putting together a strategy, a proper plan for what this person actually needs to do. How much to eat, what to eat, when to eat, how much to train, when to train, what to train, be it like cardio, strength training, how to combine those two, how to pay attention to the different levels of nutrition. So it's not only the calories, but also the macros and the micros and the meal timing. And like, it's a lot. So I totally get that. So we are just sharing what we have experienced with the ladies that we are working with. But ultimately, if you cannot figure it out, get support. Of course, we are here. You can always reach out. But get support. Like the reason why I was able to get the results that I achieved in the last, especially 5 years of my journey, is because I had the support from experts. I have not worked with the coach ever since, because it makes a huge difference in not only like my adherence to the things. And yes, I'm a fitness coach, so I do this day in, day out, and it's part of my lifestyle, of course. But still there is a different layer to it when you really want to like outgrow yourself and achieve even better results when you have someone in your corner that is watching your progress, that is invested in your journey as much as you are invested in their journey. So that's just a little side note. What's the next mistake?
The next mistake is, there are certain things that you can do to improve your carb tolerance, and not tapping into that is something that holds you back. And so there are 3 main things that you can do
or not do. We're
or
talking
not do.
today about not doing.
Yeah, so it's a double negative. But
sorry, because the last episode was on like what to do.
But so improving body composition, improving your cardio fitness, and improving your muscle endurance and muscle mass, which taps into improving body composition, is something that will help with carbohydrate. Avoiding doing this or being like, well, I don't really care about whatever it may be. I don't care about the cardio. I don't care about strength. I don't care about, the number on the scale or body composition, or, getting lean to a point but not really pushing to get really lean is definitely something that's going to have an impact on your ability to tolerate carbohydrates.
For me, I don't even hear that much that women are telling me like, hey, I don't care about my cardio, or I don't care about my strength. They're more so focusing on the wrong stuff. So I had recently a lot of like messages about like, I want to improve my I have insulin resistance. I want to work on that, improve that, or I want to improve my blood sugar levels, stuff like that. But then when you're looking at what they're doing, they're like hyper focused on blood work and trying to improve blood markers.
Or micromanaging like glucose fluctuation with the CGM, for example.
Exactly. Instead of focusing like on the big rocks, and the big rocks, as you said, are improving your body composition. So you need to improve the ratio from fat to muscle mass. And not for everyone, it's just lowering the body fat percentage, but it's also increasing the muscle mass over time. And this is where I see so many women being too narrow focused on those tiny details and the blood work markers, and sending me their blood work and telling me like, but this one, this is a little bit out of range and this is out of range, and now I will get another like
HTMA.
test done, HTMA. And not only that, but also the Dutch test, and my hormones are off. And I'm like, yes, those will all improve if you're focusing on the big rocks. So you are not currently focusing on the right stuff to improve your body composition and like really go all in on that, because that alone takes a lot of time and effort to get the results that you're looking for. And then also spending enough time like getting stronger and improving your cardiovascular system. And it's not only about just doing cardio. It's again about having a look at which of your cardio system is well developed, where do we need to spend more time, in what kind of zones, how much per week, how can we make sure the recovery is still on point, how can we make sure the strength training is not lacking because of that, because we also want to get stronger in the gym and build some muscle. And so there are a lot of things here that come into play, and those are the big rocks. You will see a big improvement. Like I have seen always a big improvement when we are focusing on that stuff, that the blood markers are improving and going in the right direction, rather than focusing on having perfect markers but
not being strong.
Or not having a great body composition, or not having a good cardio system.
And it's very interesting, right? Because when you think about it, then we know that there are only so many things that you can do to improve those blood markers, or like the minerals in your hairs or the hormones in your pee. There are only so many things that you can do. It's what you eat, it's your physical activity, it's your recovery, and then ultimately you also can tap into medical intervention. That's going to be operations or drugs. like we don't talk about that because that's not our wheelhouse, but this is something that exists and can be useful in certain cases. But pretty much everyone who is focused on blood works and Dutch test and HTMA and that sort of things, they understand that the way they are going to make some improvement is by manipulating what they eat and their physical activity and their recovery. But at the same time, instead of being super focused on increasing their performance and measuring an objective improvement with their physical activity, so strength, cardio fitness, steps is more like an add-on. It's not really something that improves over time. And then making sure that they get a ton of sleep, of high quality sleep. Then it's like, oh, but my number was a bit too high or a bit too low. And then they forget, as you said, about like really focusing on getting stronger. And it's not complicated. Like if you are able to get stronger year after year, then it means that your muscles are growing, that they are better conditioned. And if you can achieve that, then it means that they are going to give more room for carbohydrates to get into your muscle instead of floating around in your system and creating some damage. So if you have that, you have a proof that your structure has changed and that you became more insulin tolerant and that you are better equipped at eating more carbohydrate. Same thing with cardio fitness. Like if you follow cardio, like cardio stuff, like endurance sports at all, there's just nobody who's overweight there. And most of the athletes nowadays, they eat a shit ton of carbs. If you look at like runners or triathletes, they eat, I don't know, 7,000 calories per day, and they go well past 1,000 grams of carbohydrate in a day. It's a huge amount, and they are tiny. When you look at the bike riders in the Tour de France, they are just like very, 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 very tiny, very lean, but also don't have a lot of muscle. Yet, because of their activity level and because of their fitness level, they burn so much when they are active, but also at rest, that they just need more carbohydrates. So not focusing on your performance when it comes to cardio and when it comes to strength is actually very detrimental to carbohydrate tolerance.
And I mean, I understand where it comes from, the overemphasis and focus on those tiny little blood markers, your hormones, all that stuff. I was in your exact shoes. Like when I couldn't figure out like why my body is not changing, I was doing that. Like Yannick was actually my nutrition coach back then, when we were cutting my hair and analyzing the minerals in my hair to then tell me like what do I need to do.
The ratio between magnesium and sodium and what it means about your adrenals, and this is maybe adrenal fatigue and that sort of things. And
so we're not just shitting on it because we're shitting on it. Like we have been through it and we have seen the limitations of the work that you can do with that, or if the application after those results is not the right one to actually move the needle forward and really change your body composition, your like physiology, then you just have spent a lot of time on some paperwork, really. And the same for like blood work, the same for like measuring your blood glucose levels, like with the device stuff that we did also before, and like micromanaging that. It sounds like you know your shit and you are pretty advanced with what you're doing, but most of the time when women come to me and they're like listing out all those things, then I already know like they're actually avoiding focusing on the stuff they actually need to focus on to transform their body and transform their strength and cardio fitness, to improve not only their physique but also performance and health. So it's not that those are exclusive from each other. Like they are working together, and the whole idea of the work that we are doing is bringing those three things, the physique, performance, and health, together and making sure that those are improving together over time.
100%. And to do that, then there's one thing that's like so important, but also so easy. It's sleep. Right?
It's the last one.
It's the last one, and it's like the mistake that we see is just like lack of sleep.
Yeah.
And this is something that's going to have like 5 days of sleep shortage is going to change your blood markers and put you in a pre-diabetes category. So not to revive what we just said about not focusing on the right things and that sort of things. It's just to say, like, if you don't sleep enough, then this is something that's going to show up very quickly. But then if you just keep doing that for year after year after year after year, then this is something that is going to have an impact on everything that we just talked about, like your performance, your physique, but also your health. And of course, like, you might have some constraint in your life that prevent you from sleeping a ton. But the message is really like, try to sleep as much as you can, because we still hear sometimes like, I don't really like to go to bed early, or I'm watching a show, or I'm doom scrolling or whatnot. This is really like killing your gains more than anything else. It's the lack of proper recovery. So this is really a mistake that you want to avoid. And if you have the possibility to sleep more, then you should definitely do that. And, we hear all the time about like sleep at least 7 to 8 hours. And I'm sorry, but for someone who's actually active, who try to improve their cardio fitness and their strength, and to put on some muscle mass and to improve body composition and do that in a way that's going to be healthy for a long period of time, I rarely see that as enough.
Yeah.
And point in case, like, most of the time, we actually want to shoot more for like 8 to 9 hours.
Yeah.
And we also just want to remind you that some of the best athletes on the planet, they sleep up to 10.5 hours. And, before you go on and say like, but I'm not one of those athletes.
But you want to have those results, right? You want to look like an athlete. That's this is where we need to manage some expectations of like 100%. how much are you willing to give to get certain results, and don't be then disappointed if you're not looking lean and shredded and have that muscle definition and you look athletic all year around. Just some food for thought. And if you do want to bring it to the next level, and in most cases the women that come to us are not beginners, so they are already like in the game and they want that like next level of physique and performance and improved health, so they go the extra mile, and it's all about like managing what you have in front of you and making sure like, hey, how can I squeeze in half an hour more sleep, right? 15 minutes, like make it like slow little increments that add up over time. Get a nap in, cut out the show in the evening, stop doom scrolling. And it's not that we don't have to remind ourselves to do that. It's not that we are just preaching to you. It's definitely not easy. It takes effort, and it takes definitely being intentional with how you're spending your time on what stuff.
We have like 30 seconds to wrap it up, and I just want to give you one last one, a bonus that we also briefly touched on, but that's super important about carbohydrate, but it's also going to play a role into physique, health, and performance. It's going to be very, very, very difficult for you to increase your carbohydrate intake if you are not also tracking the other macros and your caloric intake. This is also a mistake that we see very often. It's just like, hey, I'm trying to increase my carbohydrate, but I have no idea how many calories I'm eating, and I don't know how much protein and how much fat I'm eating. If the only thing that you're tracking right now is loosely your protein intake, and it's like, I'm eating high protein, it's going to be very difficult to dial your carbohydrate intake in and do it accurately for your needs, for your context. So this is one mistake that we see. Don't do it. Like, if you want to increase your carbohydrate intake, then do track the rest of your food. Make sure that you have an eye on your caloric intake and on protein and fat.
And that's it for today.
And that's it for today.
Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.